The clock changed from 7:2029 to 7:30. The taxi driver continued holding the rear door open. Across the street, Ms. Hoa's assistant waited at the entrance to the exhibition hall. Tu Tien stood between them with Jack's repaired brown suitcase in one hand and the village product records in the other. On her phone, Jack was kneeling beside one of the weakened melon vines. Behind him, Hanh tied another strip of red cloth around a collapsing stem. Tu Tien looked at the open taxi, then she looked at the exhibition entrance. She slowly released the suitcase handle, closed the taxi door, and thanked the driver. "I am staying," she told Jack. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he looked toward Hanh and the workers already moving through the field. "Finish the meeting," he said. "We will protect the farm." Tu Tien carried the suitcase across the street. At the same moment, Jack picked up the disinfected cutters and walked toward the first vine that could no longer be saved. "Welcome back, and welcome to the family, if this is your first chapter." Jack and Tu Tien are rebuilding a quiet life with Mother Loi in the mountains of Vietnam. Only days ago, they helped restore water to farms across their village. Now Tu Tien has carried the family's tea, vegetables, bamboo shoots, mushrooms, and honey to an agricultural exhibition in Hanoi. A meeting with Ms. Hoa could open a new future for the village. But disease is spreading through Jack's melon field, and the first train home is just left without Tu Tien. This chapter can be watched on its own. The earlier parts of their journey are waiting in the complete series playlist whenever you are ready to discover how this family came so far. Subscribe and stay with Jack, Tu Tien, and Mother Loi. Their story is far from over. Tu Tien entered the meeting room carrying the repaired suitcase. Ms. Hoa was already seated at a long table. In front of her were 3 products from the village: Mr. Fook's mountain tea, Mai's dried vegetables, and several packages of bamboo shoots. "You are carrying a suitcase," Ms. Hoa observed. "I was deciding whether to take the first train home. And yet you came here." "My family is facing a serious problem at the farm." Ms. Hoa glanced at the clock. "Would you prefer to reschedule?" "No. The train has already left, and the village families trusted me to attend this meeting." Tu Tien placed the product records on the table. "I am ready." Ms. Hoa opened one package of dried vegetables. "Yesterday you told me that you reject products even when the family who made them needs the money." "Yes." "What happens after you reject them?" "We explain why the batch failed. Then we help the family correct the next one. And if they refuse, their product does not enter the shipment." Ms. Hoa turned to Mr. Fook's tea. "Can he supply every store in my network?" "No." "Can you double his production?" "Not without changing the way he dries the leaves." "Then what can you promise?" "A controlled amount from the batches he can protect." "We will not mix lower quality leaves into his tea simply to fill a larger order." Ms. Hoa studied Tu Tien's face. "Many small producers believe honesty will make them appear weak. Promising what we cannot deliver would make us weaker." Ms. Hoa opened the final record. "What exactly are you asking me to approve?" "A 6-week trial in 3 stores." "Only 3? 3 stores are enough to learn whether customers return for the products. If the trial succeeds, we can increase the supply slowly. And if it fails, we study the reason before asking the families to produce more." Ms. Hoa leaned back. "You are offering less than most people in this hall. I am offering the amount we can honestly protect." For several seconds, the room remained silent. Tu Tien thought of the taxi leaving without her. She thought of Jack in the wet field and Hanh recording every marked vine. She had chosen to stay in Hanoi. Now the choice had to be worth its cost. "Mrs. Zun," Hua closed the records. 3 stores, she said. 6 weeks. Tu Tien remained still. The first shipment must be ready in 10 days. Tea, dried vegetables, and bamboo shoots only. We can prepare them. There is one more condition. Miss Hoa slid a document across the table. "Before the second shipment, I will visit the village. I need to see where the products are dried, inspected, and packed." Tu Tien thought of their crowded warehouse. One wall was already damp, and the space was shared with tools, empty baskets, and farm supplies. "What standards must the workspace meet?" she asked. "It must be clean, dry, and separated from unapproved products. Each accepted batch must match its record. If the workspace or records fail inspection, the trial ends. Tu Tien read the condition carefully. Understood. Miss Hoa extended her hand. Tu Tien shook it. The trial had been approved, but the village now had 10 days to prepare the first shipment and only a few weeks to find a workspace they did not yet have. When Tu Tien left the room, she immediately called Hanh. Hanh answered from the edge of row 12. "We removed 4 vines," she reported. "Their stems had collapsed. The other 19 are still standing. Did you wait for me before removing them?" "No. They met Mr. Nam's criteria." Tu Tien felt relief beneath her fear. "You made the correct decision. The disease has not crossed into a 4th row," Hanh continued, "but several leaves inside the isolated section are worsening. Keep recording every change. Do not remove anything based only on fear." "I understand." Jack appeared behind Hanh. "How is the meeting?" 6 weeks in 3 stores. The first shipment is due in 10 days. Jack smiled, but the worry did not leave his eyes. "You did it. There is a condition. Ms. Hoa will inspect our drying and packing space before the second shipment." Jack looked toward the mountain beyond the field. "We will solve that after you return. How much rain is expected?" "Light rain this afternoon. It may become heavier tonight. Keep all infected leaves away from the runoff. Han has already deepened the first channel." Tu Tien looked at Han. "You did that without being asked?" "The lower part of the field began collecting water." "Good. Keep leading." After the call, the exhibition coordinator approached Tu Tien. "I heard your meeting went well. We received a trial order." "That is excellent." The coordinator then looked at the suitcase. "But you are leaving?" "Yes. I need to return to the village." The coordinator explained that the booth could not remain open without a trained representative responsible for the records and samples. If Tu Tien left Hanoi, the booth would close for the final 6 days of the exhibition. She looked along the aisle. Visitors were beginning to enter. Across from her, the large tea company had arranged hundreds of boxes beneath its bright display. Tu Tien's small table finally had people stopping beside it. Leaving now meant losing 6 days of possible customers, restaurant buyers, and new contacts. But the most important opportunity had already been secured. Keeping the booth open without someone who understood every product could create promises the village was not prepared to fulfill. "Please seal the remaining samples and place them in storage," Tu Tien said. "I will arrange for them to be collected." "You are certain?" "No," she admitted. "But I am responsible for what happens after people become interested, not only for attracting their attention." Tu Tien packed Ms. Mizi, who was agreement, into the repaired suitcase and traveled to the railway station. She boarded the 10:45 train. As Hanoi disappeared behind her, she placed Jack's wooden carving beside the window. 2 roads separated around a mountain and joined again on the other side. Until that morning, Tu Tien had believed the carving meant she and Jack would always choose the same destination. Now she understood its deeper meaning. 2 people could walk in different directions without abandoning each other. Trust was not remaining side by side every minute. Trust was believing that the other person would continue carrying their part of the journey. Her phone vibrated. Jack had sent a message. 11 vines removed. No 4th row affected. Rain is moving toward the village. Han is leading well. Travel safely. Tu Tien read the final 2 words twice. Jack did not tell her to hurry. He did not say the farm was helpless without her. He simply asked her to return safely. During the journey, Han continued sending photographs. The 11 removed vines had been sealed in heavy sacks and carried away from the field. The remaining marked plants stood inside the isolated area. At first, their stems appeared unchanged. Later in the afternoon, 6 additional vines inside the same isolated section developed dark marks along their leaves. The disease had not reached a 4th row, but it was becoming harder to contain inside the first 3. By the time the train entered the small mountain station, rain had begun striking the carriage windows. Jack waited beneath the narrow awning. His field jacket was wet, and mud covered his boots. When Tu Tien stepped onto the platform, he took the suitcase from her. "You stayed for the meeting," he said. "Yes. And the result? 3 stores for 6 weeks. Jack's tired face changed. "You brought the village an order. A trial order. We still have to earn the next one." The rain grew louder against the station roof. Tu Tien looked at his muddy clothes. How many vines now? 11 removed, 18 still standing inside the affected section. Take me to the field. You have been traveling all day. Jack, he recognized the expression in her eyes. They left the station together. Lanterns and work lights illuminated the melon field through the rain. The 3 isolated rows were marked with red cloth. A cleared strip of soil separated them from the healthy section. Water flowed to a shallow channel along the lower boundary. Mother Loy held open a sealed sack while Uncle Dung disinfected tools beneath a temporary shelter. Mai, the young beekeeper, and several villagers were clearing fallen leaves from the wet soil. Han approached with her notebook protected beneath her shirt. 6 new vines inside the isolated section developed the same marks this afternoon, she told Tu Tien. 6 in addition to the original 23? Yes. 29 vines have now shown symptoms. 11 have already been removed. Tu Tien looked toward the 18 remaining marked plants. Small melons still hung beneath several of them. What changed in the last hour? The stems have begun softening, Han said. All 18 now meet the removal criteria. If we cut them tonight, we lose every affected vine. If we leave them, the rain may carry infected leaves and soil across the boundary. Water rushed into the channel. Uncle Dung pushed mud away with a shovel, but the water continued rising toward the cleared strip. Jack stepped beside Tu Tien. We make the decision together. Tu Tien turned to Han. Show me the records. Han opened the notebook. Every plant had a number. Beside each number were the times of the photographs, changes in leaf color, stem condition, and the direction of the runoff. Han had not guessed. She had collected evidence. Do the records support removing all 18? Tu Tien asked. Han looked at the small fruit hanging from the weakened plants. Yes, she said quietly. I wish they did not. Tu Tien turned toward Jack. He did not tell her what to choose. He only nodded, showing that he would share the consequence. They had worked for months to bring those vines this far. Removing them meant losing fruit that might have been harvested within weeks. But leaving them could place the entire field at risk. Tu Tien looked at Han. Remove them. No one moved for a moment. Then Jack took the disinfected cutters and knelt beside the first weakened vine. The blades closed around the stem. Mother Loy opened a heavy sack. Tu Tien carefully lifted the cut vine, keeping its leaves away from the running water. Han recorded the next number, 12. Uncle Dung took the cutters at the following vine. Mai helped carry the sealed sack away from the field. The young beekeeper brought more clean bags from the shelter. The rain continued falling. The same hands that had cared for the vines for months were now cutting and removing them. 13, 14, 15. Han marked each number. When Mother Loa saw a small unripe melon inside one of the sacks, she turned her face away. Tu Tien reached toward her arm. Mother Loa shook her head and lifted the sack again. Save the rows that can still live, she said. Water began spilling over one side of the shallow channel. Han immediately closed her notebook. The lower boundary is filling. Jack and Uncle Dung began digging the channel deeper. Mai and the young beekeeper filled sacks with soil and placed them along the cleared strip. Mother Loy and Tu Tien gathered every loose infected leaf before the runoff could carry it toward the healthy plants. Han moved from group to group, checking the boundary and directing the tools back to the correct side. No one waited for Tu Tien to give every instruction. The village already knew what had to be done. Tu Tien had returned to share the burden, not to become the only person capable of carrying it. Near midnight, Han cut the final weakened vine. She returned to the shelter and placed a line beneath the last number in her notebook. 29. The isolated rows were almost empty. The young fruit was gone. The work of many weeks now rested inside sealed sacks at the edge of the farm. But the deeper channel held. The rainwater did not cross into the healthy section. The family remained in the field until the rain weakened. No one celebrated. They had acted in time to protect the remaining crop, but they could not yet know whether unseen damage had already passed beyond the boundary. At sunrise, mist covered the field. The rain had stopped. Jack examined the first healthy row while Han followed with her notebook. Tu Tien checked the plants from the opposite side. They studied every leaf and touched every stem. There were no new dark marks. The water had remained inside the channel. For that morning, the problem had not crossed into a fourth row. 29 vines were gone, but most of the harvest remained standing. Mother-in-law placed her hand gently on a healthy leaf. "We lost part of the field," she said, "not the future." Hanh remained beside the empty rows. Tu Tien returned the notebook to her. "You did not need me to tell you every step, but I needed you for the final decision," Hanh replied. "That is not weakness," Tu Tien said. "Leadership means knowing when to act and knowing when a burden should not be carried alone." Han held the notebook against her chest. Jack and Tu Tien later stood together beside the cleared section. "I wanted you home," Jack admitted. "I know, but I did not want fear to decide for you. I came home because I completed what the village trusted me to do," Tu Tien said. "Not because you made me feel guilty for leaving." Jack nodded. "There will be no more hiding the difficult part and telling you only after I solve it. And neither of us will believe we must save everything alone." Across the field, Han was already organizing the next inspection. The harvest had survived because the family accepted one painful loss before it became a greater one. That evening, they gathered beneath the veranda. Tu Tien placed Miss Hoa's trial agreement on the wooden table. "The first shipment must be ready in 10 days, she said. "Before the second shipment, Miss Hoa will inspect our drying and packing space." Jack looked toward the village warehouse. "One wall is already damp. The roof also leaks near the back corner," Uncle Dung added. "We cannot pack an important order there," Han said. Jack studied the expected income from the 6-week trial and the cost of repairing the warehouse. "We do not have enough money to rebuild it before the inspection." For several moments, the only sound came from water dripping from the veranda roof. Mother Loy stood without speaking and entered the house. When she returned, she carried an old iron key. Dark marks covered its surface, and a faded piece of red thread was tied to the top. Jack looked at it. "What does that key open?" Mother Loy turned toward the bamboo-covered hillside above the family property, "A drying house your father helped build with the villagers." Jack stared at her. "There is another drying house? It has not been used for many years. Why have you never taken us there?" Mother Loy closed her fingers around the key. "After your father's health began to fail, it was one of the last places where he could still work." Her voice became quieter. "After he died, I tried to keep it open. But every time I unlocked the door, I expected to hear him moving inside." Tu Tien gently touched her arm. Mother Loy looked toward the dark bamboo path. "I could not continue returning to a place that still felt as though he might be waiting for me." Jack stood and approached her. "Then you will not return alone." Mother Loy placed the key in his palm. "Tomorrow," she said, "I will take you there." Jack closed his hand around the cold iron. The key might open the workspace they needed to protect the village's first important order, but it would also open a door Mother Loy had kept closed since the death of Jack's father. And none of them knew what years of rain and silence had left behind. Subscribe and stay with this family, because the next chapter begins when Mother Loy finally leads Jack and Tu Tien along the forgotten path into the bamboo forest.